Wow, what a crowd. First time I'm doing this with music too, so I'm really excited. Thank you, Charlie, for coming here and waking up early in the morning, being here for us. My name is Benjamin Von Wong. I'm an artist, I'm an activist, and I try to create large-scale objects of curiosity that look something like this. The reason for creating art like this is because I want people to look at it and wonder, what am I looking at? Is this real? Is this fake? Because that curiosity gives us all the opportunity to start a conversation together. I get to say, oh, this is actually a photograph of an art installation that I built all the way in Vietnam a couple years back. And we built this art installation with the help of dozens of volunteers from the community that came together over the course of a couple weeks inside of a mall in order to build this art piece, because each and every art installation is an opportunity to bring community together to talk about things that they care about. And those little lines that you see that make up the art installation, well, those are straws, single-use plastic straws. 168,000 of them, in fact, that we collected, cleaned, and organized over the course of 9 months in order to create a Guinness World Record art installation. The work that I create, I think, serves as a complement to science. These headlines right now behind me talk about how the clothing that we wear, polyester, nylon, spandex, all releases microscopic pieces of plastic every time we do our laundry. And it's pretty terrifying. It looks something like this, where plankton eats microplastics, the fish eat the fish eat the plankton, and then we eat that fish, and it ends up right in our bodies. But this kind of thing is not always the most palatable. And where I think art is powerful is that you can take something that is very abstract, design a metaphor around it, and maybe make it more fun and playful. Like if our laundry is coming back to haunt us, why not create a monster crawling out of the laundry coming to haunt the next generation, right? Isn't this more fun to talk to your kids, to your family, to your friends about when it looks like this? And as a result of doing projects like this, eventually I've had large organizations reach out with these bigger complex issues like, hey, Ben, can you find a way to represent the energy consumption of Bitcoin mining? And so Greenpeace reached out, and I ended up, they were telling me stories about how old coal power plants were being reopened because of the price of Bitcoin going up, and that it was worth it just to convert that energy into dollars. I was like, oh, what if we could create an art installation around that? What if it was a giant 12-foot tall skull with coal smokestacks smoking and Bitcoin laser eyes shooting out, and get my nephew to stand in front of it? But it's more than just creating one art installation. I think the art is really the gateway. It's about how that art can grow into so much more, where it can be used on the cover of a report, can be used in merchandise, and maybe in the best case scenario, it can get remixed, projected onto the side of buildings, and serve as a common language, grammar, and poetry for bigger movements. And so one of the questions that I get fairly often when I show my work to people is like, how did you even get here? And the answer to that question is kind of cheesy, but it is purpose. Purpose is actually the reason that I first quit my day job as a hard rock mining engineer. I was doing photography on evenings and weekends, and I was sharing the process with people, and people were so inspired by how I was doing these larger-than-life sets that I thought, why not take a chance and pursue that passion and share that journey with the world? And I found myself doing all sorts of crazy things, like going on vacation and tying my family, not tying my family, going on vacation and tying a model 30 meters underwater in a shipwreck in Bali while on vacation, and sharing with people the process of bringing these crazy projects to life. After doing that for a little while, I started to feel that just doing crazy creative projects wasn't quite enough, and I wanted to have a purpose for all of these attention that I was getting, and I thought, okay, what are some big intractable issues in the world? I started watching some documentaries, and that's where I ended up storm chasing.
You're chasing across the small little roads.
A storm chaser called Kevin DeLay, chasing these storms at 50 miles an hour inside of a refurbished ambulance. And we're going on these tiny little dirt roads in order to showcase how these big brewing storms can serve possibly as a metaphor for climate change, while ordinary people in front of it ignored what was happening behind them. That same string of purpose eventually led me to playing around with trash. Tons and tons of trash. The story behind this one was that my mom had just shared a photo of a mermaid tail designer while I was coming to Montreal for my sister's wedding, and I thought, oh, mermaids. I really want to work with them. And they have problems too. When you think about where mermaids live, they live in the oceans, and this was right at the time where the Great Pacific Garbage Patch had just been discovered. And I thought, well, why not put a mermaid on a sea of 10,000 plastic bottles, since that's where things are going, things are happening. And this project, which I ended up creating with the help of the entire wedding party, because they were stuck there for my sister's wedding, ended up becoming so successful. We got 36 million views on the native video alone. It spread out across the world and hit the front page of many different newspapers. And I was like, man, maybe there's something here. Maybe if I can raise awareness through my art, that I can create change in the world. And fast forward 5 or 6 more years, as I continue pulling on this strand of purpose, I find myself in Nairobi, Kenya. This time surrounded by 3 tons of plastics that we had collected from the slums of Kibera. We hired hundreds of women, local women, to help clean, sort, organize, and tie all of these plastics together, because I had just gotten permission to build an art installation at the United Nations at 5 p.m. on a Friday for a Sunday 8 a.m. install. And this art installation is a 4-story tall faucet, a giant plastic tap that I had envisioned and created. And we somehow managed to pull this thing off, where this art installation gets displayed in front of 1,500 delegates from 193 different countries, where they're coming together to sign into place a global plastics treaty. And I'm here because I believe that art has the power to shift the world, or at least I think it does, and I want to put the work not in front of the everyday person, but this time around the decision makers, the policy makers. And it seems to resonate with people, because at the end of the day, this ends up being the very thing that everyone uses to communicate out the plastic pollution problem, whether they're for-profits, non-profits, government officials, all coming together under the same banner to talk about how important it is for us to turn off the plastic tap. In fact, this symbol ends up being so popular that just a couple months back, the United Nations releases their plastics report, and they choose to use my art on the cover of it, which is wonderful. They didn't pay for it, but I'm stoked anyways. But here's kind of the problem, right? If I take a step back as an activist, the goal of the activist is to create art that moves the world forward, that changes something. But when I actually look at the plastic pollution problem, this blue curve behind me shows how much plastic is being produced each and every year since its inception. And you see that curve doesn't really go down. It only goes up. And in fact, it's not just a linear curve, it's an exponential one. And it just feels like, despite plastics awareness being at an all-time high, plastic pollution is only just growing and increasing. And looking at this curve, I can't help but feel like, man, despite all of this success, nothing that I'm doing is actually enough, right? And so even though I've tried my best, I've chased down every single possible avenue, I've poured every single extra dollar that I ever had into trying to create the biggest campaigns that have the greatest impact, I am still not feeling like I am doing enough. And so about this time last year, in March, I was contemplating a career switch. I was like, man, is the work effective? Does it matter? Does it make a difference? And so even though I had, done what everyone says, chase your purpose, pursue your passions, I felt that purpose had kind of become a little bit unsustainable. But let's pause here for a second and switch the tone and look at this whole thing from another angle. Because I think there's something really funny here, because if you take a step back and you look at what I just said, I'm basically saying that I have failed as an artist because I have not single-handedly, through my art, managed to resolve one of the most intractable issues that humankind has been facing, There's something mildly egotistical and wildly crazy about that, right? It's kind of weird. But somehow, despite pursuing this entire career around sustainability, trying to get people to be more sustainable, the internal narrative that I have about my own life was like, I wanted an infinite growth in my own career success. I wanted to work with bigger brands, bigger partners, have greater impact. And that question of what is enough actually never quite crossed my mind until I reached the point where I was like, wait, this is not enough. And this became the very question that I spent the last year just thinking about and trying to work through. And so after spending, many months of going back and forth and debating with myself, there are a couple stories that came out that I thought, or a couple insights that came out that I thought would be interesting to share. The first is that there is a difference between purpose and a person. And I think it's really important that we separate these two. For the purpose part, to relieve the burden of each individual supposedly being there to change the world, I think shedding a little bit of that hero's journey and saying it is one person's job to change everything, I think is really helpful. Because we live in a complex, interconnected system of people coming together, trying to do their part. And so the right question isn't how am I going to solve the entire thing, but how can I solve one part of it? What is my role in that ecosystem? And I think for me as an artist, that role is to create great art and to make sure that people within the movement know about it. That's it. Create great art, make sure people in the movement know about it. And on the person side of things, the question that I came up with that felt really important to answer is, what is enough for me to thrive? Because if I, the individual, am not fulfilled, if I don't have enough to feel connected to the world, to take breaks, to have fun, to be playful, then my career is not sustainable, and then the work cannot exist, and I cannot fulfill my purpose. And of course, as you think about enoughness, it's inevitable that we all think about this. What is enough money? What is enough money? And this was a pretty interesting one, because I think there's this whole movement right now that tells us that we need to feel our feelings more. We need to be in touch with our body. We need to sense when things are not right and listen to that and fix things. But I think with money, it's completely different. With money, there's feelings and reality. And reality is just a balance sheet. It's math. I know we don't all like math, but it's math. And regardless of how you feel about something, whether or not you can afford something, whether or not something is investable, whether or not you should, these are all calculations that you can make very practically. There's a book that I discovered that I thought was particularly compelling. It was called It's Not About the Money by Brent Kessel. In there, he talks about the 8 different financial archetypes, and I happen to be an idealist, an empire builder, and a guardian. The idealist feels that money is the source of all problems, and so it feels really guilty for any amount of wealth that they have, so I already feel like I have privilege. I feel guilty about that. The empire builder wants to accumulate more resources so they can create greater projects. No, I feel bad and I want more. And then the guardian is scared of losing whatever wealth they have, regardless of how much they have. And so I feel guilty, I want more, and I feel bad, and I feel scared because I might lose it all anyways. And so you can see how that doesn't create a very healthy relationship to money, and that no matter what I do, I'm kind of trapped. And so maybe it's much more healthy to feel those feelings, acknowledge them, and then say, all right, cool, let's move on. The other lesson that I learned that I think was pretty powerful was that this idea of chasing success might not necessarily be the right one. So when you're chasing success, you spend a lot of time in that chase, not actually catching and enjoying the very thing you're trying so hard to get. Because once you achieve that new award, that new title, that new fellowship, that new project, it's quickly over, and you're off chasing the next thing. And so instead of chasing success, I've been thinking that perhaps it's important for us to rather nurture the conditions for success to thrive. Because then we may spend much more time enjoying that journey and enjoying the results. The little graphic that I designed back there, the actual analogy is like if you're chasing after butterflies, you're spending your time chasing butterflies. Instead, why not plant the plants that attract the butterflies instead? The marigolds, the milkweed, the sunflowers. And then you can just sit there and enjoy and allow the butterflies to come to you. And this idea of nurturing conditions is actually what has led me right here to New York City. In the last 4 months, I've been here, and it's been wonderful. I came here because I wanted to be in a place that I could find humble badasses that were making the world a better place. New York seems to be a place that values multiple forms of capital. Yes, financial capital, of course, but cultural capital, social capital, intellectual capital. It's a place where everyone is kind of a multi-hyphenate, and no one really spends much time at home Netflix and chilling because they live in such tiny spaces. So they gotta get out there. They gotta meet people. They gotta be places like this. And that is awesome because it's really my vibe. And over the last 3 months that I've been here, I've been building a project that is slated to go up on the High Line in like 5 days or so. And as I said earlier, every single one of my projects is about bringing people out to collaborate and co-create together. And I've had so many people come out to help. They're chefs, florists, botanists, hypnotists, people who are in between jobs, people who are videographers, all coming together out of nowhere just to help. Some of them are actually here in this audience today, showing up just to listen in. And I think it's so beautiful to watch all these people just come together to fight for something that they believe in. And there's one more lesson that I think I'm trying to integrate as I move forward into the world. And I think it's particularly relevant for the fellow activists and environmentalists that are in the room. Because when we tackle issues like climate change, it's hard to find hope sometimes. I actually drew this little dot. Sometimes hope feels like that. And that dot almost feels like it's shrinking because these metrics of success that we're trying to hit, these goals that we're trying to hit, we keep failing at them, and the science is telling us how screwed we are all the time. And it gets really dark, it gets really heavy, and it gets really depressing. But it is up to us to find ways of integrating more balance into our lives. Tiny little yin-yang logo up there. Because the way you create more hope in the world is by finding hope first within yourself. I think it's important that we also take the time to pay attention to what kind of content we are consuming, what kind of people we're surrounding ourselves up with. We're the solution makers, those that are doing cool things that we want to celebrate and also put out into the world. And what that looks like in my case looks something like this. I recently learned about this thing called biochar. And I'm surprised that I didn't know about it earlier, but biochar is responsible for 89% of verified carbon removal credits. The best way to describe biochar is like a piece of toast that you put too long in the toaster. It comes out, it doesn't really catch on fire, but it's black. It doesn't catch on fire because you're putting it in a low oxygen environment. And if carbon doesn't meet oxygen, then CO2 isn't formed. And what you end up with is a chunk of carbon that you can crumble in your hands and toss into the soil, and it helps to rejuvenate the soil. It's great at absorbing micronutrients. It's great at preventing fertilizer runoff. It's great at retaining moisture. So it's both good for climate adaptation and climate mitigation. And it's really easy to do. And so I ended up in Thailand wanting to do something with this biochar that no one had really kind of done before. And we ended up creating this giant 6-meter tall phoenix where each piece of biochar ended up being a feather of the art installation. And when I look at something like this, a phoenix rising from the ashes to fight climate change, I think there's something really different about this versus the other work, which shows the magnitude of what the solution could be versus the magnitude of the problem. And so this is where I would like to move towards, to find allies in, to find friends in, to co-create with. And now as I stand here on this stage, good 1 solid year since contemplating a career switch, I'm proud to say that after all this introspection and these different frameworks and questions that I've asked myself, I'm feeling better. Nothing has actually changed in my life. I'm still just an artist, trying to do its best, just pulling on that string of purpose, creating work, trying to touch people's hearts, trying to move the needle forward. But I feel better. I feel more in peace. I feel more in balance. And I feel like I have the bandwidth to keep exploring these big, important topics. And so what I'd like to leave you with today are 3 questions, in case you ever find yourself in the same situation as me. The first question that I think is really important to know is, what is your metric for a year well lived? I think a year is the perfect amount of time because it's long enough for you to know whether or not you're heading, like it's long enough to set some ambitious goals, but not too short that you kind of lose your way in between. Having metrics is really important because at least you have an idea of whether or not you're walking in the right direction, right? And these can be personal, these can be professional, it doesn't really matter. The second is, do you have enough to live that life? And when I do the exercise, I feel that for most of us, in general, there's only one or two things that we feel like we don't have enough of, and that becomes very simple and easy to focus on. Because now you're not trying to maximize all the metrics of abundance, but rather you're just focusing on the minimum that's enough for you to thrive. And the third and final one that I think is perfect for this room is, who can help you get there? Because this is not a journey that we go through alone. This is one that we go on together. And I'm pretty sure that there's someone in this room that is your who that can help you get there. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful time here at Creative Mornings. Thank you for having me. And Charlie. Come on. Yeah. Cool. And by the way, this QR code is because I need friends. And if you want to be friends, please take a photo.
Benjamin, you need to forward to the QR code.
Oh. Yeah. I need friends, so I made a QR code looking for humble badasses if you guys want to hang out or do something. Anyways, thank you.
Oh, wait. Stay.
Oh, I need to stay. I can't leave.
Okay, how are we doing on time? Yes, we have time for Q&A. It's my favorite
right,
thing.
Q&A, I forgot.
Do you want to ask questions? I see one arm up. I have one enthusiastic person over here.
Tina, I've got one over here too.
No,
Okay.
keep playing.
Okay, you go first and then I'll hand down the mic.
What are your answers? Hi.
Oh, hi. Sorry.
What are your answers to those 3 questions?
Oh, great. What is your metric for a year well lived? For me, on the personal front, was to participate in 4 week-long immersive experiences, learning something that I don't know anything about, at least 4 in the year. And then on the creative and artistic challenging front, I want to do at least 4 projects in a way that I hadn't managed to do before, and to challenge myself. And then I have sort of more squishy qualitative metrics, is just around friends and community, but I haven't like articulated exactly what that is. On the second question, which is, what do I not have enough of? It was community, which is what brought me to New York City. I have friends all around the world, but as a nomad bopping around, I've just never managed to figure out community. I've been really good at building an audience, but I haven't figured out community. And that's something that I'm trying to do, and I think if I stay in one place a little longer, that might help. And then the third, the who's, I guess that's what this QR code is for, so we'll figure it out, but I think this seems like a really good place to start. So, thank you.
Thank you for the amazing soundtrack. As far as you creating community, it seems as though you have managed to create quite a few communities in the production of your work, which I think is an amazing feat and something that creatives tend to struggle with when it comes to gathering people to help support big ideas. And I actually contributed some plastics to the current project going up on the Highline. Thank you very much. I thought it was actually incredibly creative, the way that you partnered with a sustainable fashion organization to create what I assume is going to be some large fashion-based works on the Highline, I'm guessing. I have 2 questions around that. One, how have you managed to create those great partnerships and communities around building your work? And what are you going to do with the plastic after? And will you
sure.
track that progress? Because
Right.
that, if you said you're interested in tracking the solutions, maybe track what happens after your work too.
For
So
sure.
curious on both of those counts.
Yeah. So I think, and this is kind of a hunch, I don't really have like quantitative, like hard data to explain it, but I have a hunch that people really like to be involved in things that are really big and ambitious. And actually, the bigger and bolder and weirder the thing that you're trying to do is, the more chance you have of people actually wanting to participate in them. Because it just sounds weird. It sounds interesting. It's like, oh, I don't know what this person's doing. I'm just gonna come participate because it sounds really cool and creative. And so maybe if you're struggling to find people to partner up with you on something, maybe the question is like, what would make you want to partner up with them, and how do you craft a story that feels, worth people's time? On the plastic front, so the art installation that we're building on the High Line is made entirely out of single-use plastics, and we're basically making a giant multi-headed hydra with bathroom mirrors instead of heads, and that showcases the magnitude of the problem. But then hidden inside the heart of the beast is going to be like a little keyhole. And in that keyhole is a tiny miniature refillable station that people can kind of see how things used to be, with a call to action that says don't rebuy, just refill. And so hopefully in one like nice Instagrammable shot, you can put your phone in there and you can pull it out and you can see the problem and the solution in one shot. And the art installation is going to go and live permanently in New Jersey at a place called Kearney Point, which is where the Fly On NY headquarters are. So people can go and have their unsustainable helicopter tour of New York City, and then they can feel guilty about it and take some photos next to the art installation. That's the hope. So yeah.
Which one of your pieces is your favorite, and which one is the most sentimental to you?
Thank you. So my current favorite project is the Phoenix one, because I have really struggled to figure out how do you take this career of being the trash boy and like move that into something that's more hopeful and exciting. And so the Phoenix is my current favorite that I really love. The one that's most sentimental, I guess there's a lot of sentimentality around like my past work. The stuff that was just a lot more light and creative, just for the sake of creative. Like the one where I tied a model 30 meters underwater in a shipwreck. It's like, it's so cool to be able to have these projects, but I don't know, for whatever reason these days, I can't bring myself to go back there now that I have this whole sort of purpose thing behind it. So that feels very sentimental, but a chapter in the past.
We have one over here. Hi, congratulations on the great work.
Thank you.
So I want to go back to when you said you had this crisis if you thought you were kind of doing the right thing, and I found it very surprising because for us, your work is like amazing and you're an accomplished artist. So like if you have that crisis, like imagine like what more regular people go through, and yeah, like just how you overcame that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one thing taking like 15 years of my career and slamming it into 15 minutes and making it look pretty for you guys. And it's another to like live it, where you do, like I'm doing like 2 or 3 large projects a year, and sometimes like one falls through and it's somewhat feeling like catastrophic. The other is like I can spend years on a project or months on a project and leave there with like $0 or $- and just being like, man, was that worth it? Like, did I put my resources in the right place? And so I think that's where the feeling of crisis and not enoughness actually comes from. It's just like the reality of creating art is a lot harder than just a little talk that you kind of make it all sound pretty for. Like, it makes a lot of sense, but I had to string my life together to make sense for you guys, to tell you a nice story. And how I got through it was I have friends, just a lot of conversations, a lot of introspection. I took some time out. Like, one of the things that I've been trying to do is like work through my relationship to struggle, like shifting from ease to struggle. I actually wrote a series of guidelines on how to make decisions in my life, how to create a more sustainable life. I call it Golden Guidelines. You can shoot me a text and or a note and an email, and I'll happy to send that to you guys. Just really trying to like understand what are the how I work, what brings me joy, what makes my life work. Like I recently remapped my core values, and I realized that my core values are actually first, curiosity and adventure. So I love novelty, I love excitement, and that's really important. But the reason that I do it is because I want to have change and transformation, both internal and external. And I want to show up in a way that's kind and authentic and compassionate at the same time. So like that sort of created like a little bit of a guide, but that's also fairly recent. Like I figured it out, I worked through it. And so I just spend a lot of time trying to like understand like, what is the like underlying programming code that makes this little robot tick? And then from there, how can I work through it? So just, I don't know, I just human. Try to
And
human.
on that note, give this man a rock star round of applause, man.
Thank you. And Charlie. Thank you. Yay.